Today, I'm here chatting with Joanna Calabrese and Paul Mills. Now, they're the predominant filmmakers behind a short film that's been nominated at our London Film Festival called This Is Not the Time. And Joanne, if you could tell me how you're connected to this film. Obviously, I know what the connection is and how the film came to be made, and more importantly, what the film is actually about, and then perhaps we can explain to the listeners what Paul's connection is with this film as well.
Sure, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. The film really tries to capture the mood on the street in New York City around the presidential election in November 2016. Specifically, the evening that Paul's performance was captured was the night of the vice presidential debate. And there was a lot of discussion all over town just about what was going on in our country and in the political arena as well. And so what I tried to do with this film is capture the mood on the street, what was happening, and more sort of as an observer versus more of a commentator. So that's what we tried to do. And we ultimately wound up looking, once the election was over, and things started happening in Washington, and we started to have a lot of political discussions as a result of the election. We started to sort of think about what was happening today, what was happening at other points in time in our history, and we started to think about the correlation between what was happening in the civil rights movement around what was happening in San Francisco to begin all of those movements, and we captured some of that older footage and brought it into the film to sort of show a little bit of that correlation. I'll let Paul talk about the song, because the song is really the driver and was really the inspiration to bring the film together.
Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, and thank you, Steve, for inviting us to participate in this project. The song is about my feelings about political activity and artistic activity, which is the need to get out there and act, do something, rather than succumb to the cynicism and despair that one can feel in the world today, both as an artist and as a political actor. This was the decision behind performing this song as opposed to any number of others that we might have done when we were performing live at the Bitter End, which is an historic music venue in New York City, in Manhattan. And I got together with some really great musicians, and we, I would say, kind of defiantly took the stage with a type of music that you don't hear in other venues, with this message of defiance, of setting aside discouragement or obstacles, internal or external. And at the same time, there was this sense that we had to defy the forces in our society and try and get someone elected who would help us to rectify the situation and bring people to freedom and a better life, as opposed to what we actually ended up with. But that feeling persists and continued to persist and just got stronger after the individual took over the White House that we're talking about.
Of course.
And colored all of our decisions about how to put this film together and what to do with it.
And thank you both for explaining that so well. And before we move on to obviously how you two know each other, I mean, I've got hundreds of questions in my head, and I'm quite aware that trying to keep it 20 to 30 minutes is always a good time, which in some ways a shame because, like I say, all these things that are buzzing around at the moment. But one thing that was just immediately came to mind as you were explaining this, Paul, and to a lesser degree, well, I suppose the spark was what you said, actually, Joan. Is there a please don't take this the wrong way, but it's just I think so we can get a sense of perhaps the word is frustration. Is there visceral anger and despair with the people that did not vote for that particular person in the White House? Now, I hope that's not too strong a way for me to question this, but I'd really quite like to understand what the mood is, if you like, on the street for the people that did not vote for the man that's holding the keys to the White House now.
Well, I would say that the premise for the film really came from after I went to go to the bitter end to go see Paul and the band. The next day, I was at a Trump protest rally in front of Trump Tower, and I went there and I was observing what was happening. There were a few things happening, which I think is reflective of what's happening today. There were people who were protesting very, very clearly, saying people were protesting against Trump, right? Holding signs, and that's in the video. And then there were people who were just sort of walking by, not caring, just saying whatever. And then there were people holding signs saying, "You lost, get over it." And I feel as though that premise, I came home and I was very upset about what I had experienced there because there was no sort of discussion, there was no discourse, there was a lot of finger pointing, objectifying people, us versus them, and that made me very, very nervous. So I came home and that was the first draft of the film that I put together, again with Paul's words, as an inspiration to those images and also reinforcement of what I saw at that protest rally. And then it really grew from there. I know, Paul, you probably have some comments on that as well.
Well, I would say, first of all, in answer to your question, Steve, yes, there's a lot of anger and despair, among other feelings, in those of us who lost in that presidential election. There's also just a persisting feeling of amazement. People just can't believe that this happened, that this person could have been nominated by the Republican Party to be president. He could have had so much support when he was so flagrantly not qualified for the job. We have two political parties principally in the United States, the Republican and the Democratic Party. And the last president, President Obama, was a Democrat, and he was reelected, in fact. And there really isn't that. It is not really that extraordinary that the Republican candidate won after 8 years of the Democrat. Things tend to move back and forth between the two parties. Yeah. And there's a little difficulty in getting a member of the incumbent party to be elected. Yeah. And in fact, Hillary Clinton ran virtually as an incumbent. She had been his Secretary of State and promised to continue his very popular and very successful policies. But she was still the incumbent, and the fact that the Republican ended up being elected by a very narrow margin, so narrow, in fact, that the popular vote was for Hillary Clinton. The fact that the Republican won is not so astonishing. What's astonishing is that out of a field of many candidates, this man was the one selected to represent the Republican Party, and by a landslide in the pre-election competition. He defeated his rivals with the most ridiculous and outrageous behavior, blatant falsehoods, absurd statements, and clownish behavior, and yet he became the the candidate of the Republican Party. That is what was so astonishing. And then to have him on top of that win the election and occupy the White House is just something. People, I was not in New York or anywhere near New York for 9/11, the destruction of the World Trade Towers. Yeah. But even at a great remove we all understood that we were living in a new world now as a result of this event. And that is a big part of the feeling that people have about the current situation with the current person occupying the White House. Just amazement, a sense of unreality, a sense that the reality we believed in previously was somehow false, and it paralyzes you. It paralyzes you or it tends to paralyze people from taking any action. We really don't know where we are or who we are or what we should do, and that was definitely part of the, as you say, spark behind all of what we have done, both as a singer-songwriter and as a filmmaker, is to try and get a hold of some fundamental values and pursue them, despite all of the confusion, all of the despair, and all of the anger.
And I would just say, as a film,
no,
I was just going to say, as a filmmaker, I think what I've observed is like the extreme. So I feel as though our current president filled a void. There was a void that was created by the extreme left and the extreme right. And so it could have been anyone, because it was, we're just not having a conversation in this country, and it's really the extremes of people not listening to each other and not having this civil discourse. And this is really how I started working with Paul in a more general sense, is the work that he's done, and he's devoted his life to this type of work and art, and something I believe very strongly in. Why I make these films with him is because I sort of want to sort of take that, his words sort of represent them in a very visual, impactful way.
I mean, I know that this is deliberately an 8-minute film, and you could quite easily, and I suppose actually, Paul, this might be more about you, really. You could quite easily have expanded this, and I have to say, by the way, I really like the way you filmed this, Joe, and I love the stylisation you gave to this. But I suppose making it longer would mean to write more music. Or look, I'm sorry, I'm probably putting words into your mouth. I suppose the question is, why did you keep it to 8 minutes? Because you could have easily made it a 20 or 30 or 40-minute film.
That's for you, Joe.
I think
why only 8 minutes when we could have gone on for an hour exploring this issue? Why did we leave it only at 8 minutes?
Well, right now this is about a moment in time. So it was trying to capture what was happening, as we said, sort of during the election. I think this is the beginning of a larger project that we're working on. But I think for this particular film, we thought this was the most impactful. I will say that this also was not a planned film. It's not like Paul and I got together and said, "Hey, let's make a film and write a song about it." Actually, it was the opposite. It sort of came together very, very organically. Once the performance was the entire performance was very moving, all the entire concert. And this particular, just because of what was happening, like I said, when I went to the Trump protest rally, really sort of came to life and seemed to be very, very relevant in my mind. So and then we collaborated on the visuals and really tried to make it impactful.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be an awkward question, but it just. It was just interesting to know, because I ask that question sometimes of filmmakers, why they choose a film to be a particular length, and you get all sorts of different answers. And it's always intriguing to know why films are made a particular length. And it was just of interest to me, because, as I said, you could easily have made it a lot longer, but it is what it is for a particular reason. And actually, thank you, Dan, because as you explained, this is perhaps something that's part of a bigger project.
It is part of a bigger project, but I think it's also that this was really, the premise of this was really, the driver was Paul's song, and that was the song in its entirety. And that really drove a lot of the messaging, the visual message is right. I mean, Paul and I have worked together now for a couple of years, and we have a lot of, great things that we're pulling together for a larger feature film project that we've just finished the treatment of that film and first draft of the script, and we're starting to get some feedback on that, and that's something I'd like to focus on for next year. same message that when you look at this film, this is very similar message in the broader feature film that we're working on.
And Paul, how difficult is it to? You won't be surprised to know I've spoken to lots of composers they've done film scores and short films along and all sorts of things. But when you're right, forgive me for putting it this way, because if it's the wrong way for me to describe this, I apologise. But when you're trying to write a piece of music that some would suggest is part of a protest, if that's the right way to explain it, how much more difficult is it to write that kind of music than, shall we say, I don't want to say traditional music that you might be more involved in, but I guess you know what I'm getting at, because this is thematically driven, isn't it? And it's not necessarily about, I don't know, a loved one that you've lost or the best relationship you've ever had. This is something very strong and very, you're trying to get a message over. Does that make sense?
I know exactly what you're talking about, I believe. And I would say that this is not a real easy topic for me to write about, even though I've spent so much of my life engaged in civil rights activity, because it is so rare that I imagine myself talking to people about these issues. My friends tend to be all on board with me, in agreement with me about civil rights.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to tell some woman that, you know what, it really wasn't appropriate for you to act in that fashion. That's something that I can imagine myself saying to that person. Or if I want to write about how disappointed I am in certain events, and I'm talking to someone, or just to myself, that's something that I easily slip into, and the song is a result. But addressing people about civil rights, if I were to bring up at a party the idea that we really have to treat all people equally and be inclusive, and we can't structure our financial system so that the rich people get enormously richer while poor people are starved. People would begin looking at their iPhones. I mean, everybody knows that they don't want to hear about this. But this was a rare feeling. This was an unusual situation. I'm not talking about it's wrong. What I'm talking about is don't give up. We have to fight this. We have to try to be artists. We have to try and rectify the situation in spite of all of the odds that are stacked against us. We still have to try. And that is something that I can easily imagine myself saying to myself and to others. And in fact, I am in the song, speaking to myself and to specific fellow artists who share the experience that I have of really difficult circumstances in trying to be an artist in our society today. When you're starting out as an artist, all of that adversity is just makes it a lot more fun and a lot more exciting. But as the years go by and the adversity is still there, people get disappointed and fall away. And some people are just hanging on by their fingernails. And that was a feeling that I really do want to bring up and discuss with people. And you really get a chance to do that with your friends. People don't want to hear that. They don't want to address that. But maybe they'll listen to it in a song. And, the really gratifying aspect exciting artistic endeavor in the face of very difficult circumstances. And I got a collaborator. She turned it into this brilliant film, and it has been a surprise success at festivals all over the country and all over the world. I mean, it's very gratifying that a song about how we have to try in spite of past defeats and likely future defeats has resulted in so much success is ironic and I think useful as an illustration.
And I did look at the nominations you've had in the awards from other festivals, and you're absolutely right. It's been balmy great recognition. Look, I'm still reeling from the Brexit vote from June 16. So what's that? A year and a half ago, and I still genuinely cannot believe what's happened to us. So, as I said to Joanne a couple of weeks ago, we've had our Brexit moment, and you've had Trump. So we're not, in terms of shell shocks. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, sure, of course, yes.
You know, it's the whole political landscape has been changed. The dynamic in this country has changed forever, to be frank. So, going back to saying at the beginning, how did you two connect? How did that happen?
Well, we were mutual friends.
Yeah.
We met some mutual friends, I think.
We especially know each other through an Irish guitarist named Jerry Leonard, whose work Joanne also uses in her films. And we know him through my wife, who's a singer-songwriter who performs with this guitarist, Jerry Leonard. So that's really how we know each other. And I guess at some point, Joanne was generous enough to take a look at one of the videos that I have done of my music, and that caught her interest at a time when she was looking for new projects as a filmmaker. And we live just a few blocks apart here in Manhattan. We both live on the Upper West Side. Right. We both live right near Central Park. In fact, we often run into each other in the park. And faithfully, we ran into each other on the subway. And it was after that meeting on the subway that we really began to work together.
Okay.
You never know who you're going to meet on a street train. Yeah.
No, you don't. And just finally, actually, it's for you, Joanne. I've asked you this question when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and that was a great conversation. But I hope you don't mind. I'm going to ask you again because this has been recorded, as you know. And it's all to do with the finished product and how happy you are with the finished article. And I'd love, I love, and I told you the story about Kubrick's cinematographer, so you know you were in great company here. And the question was, in case you didn't know, Paul, was, and obviously this is to Joanne as a filmmaker, are you happy with the finished art product, or do you wish you'd added or subtracted more?
I mean, how much time do we have? Really? I mean, this is. Am I happy? No, I'm absolutely not happy with it. I mean, I love the performance. The performance is amazing, and as a filmmaker, there's so many things, but it's also, you know, Paul and I have done quite a number of films together, and it's really an evolving, you know, process. And through our collaboration, I'm really growing as a filmmaker in my craft. And so, what I'm sort of torn between is, do I go back and fine tune it and spend more time on it? Do I say, okay, time to focus on our feature film, which is actually called How Far to Zuccotti Park, which is another piece of work that we did together in the past. How do I move forward? There's always this constant friction of, do I move forward? Do I go back? But I think at this point, we're still getting a lot of feedback from the film festivals, and I would say at this point, as a filmmaker, I'm not 100% comfortable with it, but I don't know if I ever will be. So, you know, I would love to hear Paul's thoughts on this as well, because this is a visual art form representing his beautiful words.
Well, I would say that the first draft of the film I thought was just perfect and couldn't be improved. on it and do different things with it. And Joanne kept coming up with different ideas, which just made it so much better. It's really hard to know what let's make it three-dimensional. I don't know couldn't we just get the volume louder? Things like that. I mean, there's no limit to what I might wish for. But right from the beginning, I thought she did such a great job with the multi-screen approach, and I think that the addition of the protester footage came. I don't know, maybe weeks later, or in my mind, that came much later, and it was just such a tremendous addition, and it's a departure in many ways from some of our other collaborations. For example, it doesn't have the lyrics on the screen, which is something we've done in other, which is something that's happened in other of the films that she's made. But really, I really wouldn't change any of it unless Joanne came up with a better idea to change it. I don't know what she might come up with. As far as the song itself is concerned, it is embattled. This is a performance that is taking place in the middle of a war by people who are fighting, and you don't expect everything to be perfect. That would be all wrong for the kind of feeling, the kind of message that this song is supposed to have. So I really wouldn't change anything, although I cringe at any number of moments as I watch that video. But no, it's not supposed to be polished and just right. This is a battle in a war that's just going on and on and on. So I think it should have parts of it that I don't completely approve of.
Brilliant.
Well said.
That's it. Well,
yep.
Paul and Joanne, would you believe that's nearly over 28 minutes? That's a perfect time. That's it. Paul, the biggest thanks is to you, well, to both of you, for obviously the interview, particularly with Paul sorting this out in terms of getting Skype to work. I'm really sorry we couldn't get it to happen at the beginning, but we got there in the end. And Joanne, as I knew it would be, and I said to you a couple of weeks ago, and as I predicted, I knew I'd get a great interview because filmmakers just do not disappoint. It's a fact. You've always got great stories to tell. So no, but I'm saying that from the heart, because just speaking to you both now, I know we could go to a bar. Obviously we can't because you're in New York and I'm not, and sit there and talk for hours and hours and hours, and I'm never going to get bored. So thank you very, very much for both of your time.